My father kicked me out with nothing but a backpack and $4 in my pocket. I was supposed to fail. I was supposed to come back and beg. But instead of giving up, I did something no one expected. I bought an abandoned police station for just $4. What I built inside those broken walls didn't just prove him wrong. It changed my entire life. Hey everyone, before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our YouTube family by hitting that subscribe button and turning on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story like this. Don't forget to like this video and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, let's get into the story. Ponsina. The night my father kicked me out, the rain was relentless. It wasn't the gentle kind that taps softly against the windows. It was the kind that hits like punishment. The sky was dark, thunder rolled in the distance, and the porch light flickered above the doorway as if even it was unsure whether to stay on. We had argued before. We had disagreed about my future, my decisions, my refusal to follow the path he had chosen for me. But that night was different. His patience was gone. His voice wasn't loud. It was cold. "You think you're strong?" he said. "Go survive on your own. Don't come back." Those words didn't just sting. They sliced through me. I stood there, soaked from the rain that had already started to fall harder, holding a backpack with only a few clothes inside. No savings, no job, no plan. My father stepped back into the house and shut the door. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed louder than the thunder. That was it. I walked down the driveway slowly, my shoes splashing through puddles. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Something inside me was frozen. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that I'd figure something out. But as the rain soaked through my jacket and the cold hit my skin, reality settled in. I had nowhere to go. That first night, I found shelter under a small bridge near the highway. The concrete was cold and damp. Cars passed overhead, their tires hissing on wet asphalt. I pulled my backpack close and tried to sleep sitting up. Hunger wasn't the problem yet. It was the shock, the disbelief. How does your own father close the door on you? By the second day, pride was the only thing keeping me upright. I refused to call friends. I refused to ask for help. I kept hearing his words in my head. "You'll never survive." That sentence became fuel. I wandered through the city, looking at buildings differently. Offices, stores, abandoned lots. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for opportunity, even if I didn't know what that meant yet. By the third night, hunger had replaced shock. I counted the few coins in my pocket. $4. $4 between me and complete nothingness. I didn't know it then, but those $4 were about to change everything. That night, as I sat outside City Hall to stay dry under its entrance roof, I noticed a small paper pinned to the community board. Abandoned municipal property auction. Starting bid, $4. I stared at it longer than I should have. $4, the exact amount I had left. And for the first time since being kicked out, I felt something dangerous and powerful rise inside me. Hope. The next morning, I didn't sleep much. The cold from the concrete floor outside City Hall had settled deep into my bones. But my mind was racing. That small paper on the notice board kept replaying in my head. Abandoned municipal property. Auction. Starting bid, $4. $4. It felt like a cruel joke. Like the universe was testing whether I was desperate enough to try something crazy. By mid-morning, a small group of people gathered inside a dusty municipal room for the auction. Most of them looked like experienced investors, men in suits, women with folders and tablets, people who clearly knew what they were doing. I didn't belong there. My clothes were wrinkled. My shoes were dirty. I hadn't shaved in days. But I sat quietly in the back. One by one, properties were listed. Old warehouses, empty lots, small abandoned homes. The bids went far beyond anything I could even dream of offering. My heart started sinking. Maybe the $4 listing was just symbolic. Maybe the real price would jump immediately. Then the clerk announced it. Lot 17, former East District Police Station. Starting bid, $4. A projector displayed a faded photo of an old brick building. The roof looked damaged. Windows were broken. The police sign above the entrance was barely hanging on. It didn't look like opportunity. It looked like failure frozen in time. The room was silent. No one raised a hand. The clerk repeated, "Starting bid, $4. Some investors whispered to each other. I overheard someone mutter, "That place is condemned. Not worth the trouble." Condemned. The word should have scared me. Instead, it made me think of myself. That building had been abandoned, written off, declared useless, just like me. Before I could overthink it, I raised my hand. $4, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. A few heads turned. One man near the front laughed softly. The clerk looked at me, slightly confused. "Any higher bids?" he asked. Silence. No one moved. Going once, going twice. My heart pounded in my chest. "Sold, $4. The sound of the small wooden gavel hitting the desk felt unreal. Just like that, the abandoned police station was mine. Mine. I handed over the 4 crumpled dollar bills, the last money I had in the world. The clerk gave me official paperwork and a set of old rusted keys. As I stepped outside, holding those keys in my hand, reality hit. I no longer had money, but I had a building. An abandoned police station on the edge of town. I didn't know if it was madness or destiny. All I knew was this: my father had kicked me out with nothing, and now I owned something. The police station stood at the far edge of town, past empty lots and faded storefronts that had long given up on business. As I walked toward it for the first time with the rusted keys in my hand, it looked even worse than it had in the auction photo. The brick walls were stained dark from years of rain. The metal sign that once proudly read East District Police hung crooked, barely attached. For a moment, doubt crept in. What had I done? I pushed the heavy front door open, and it let out a loud groan as if protesting my presence. The air inside was thick with dust and neglect. Papers were scattered across the floor. Old desks sat broken and tilted. A cracked bulletin board still held faded wanted posters from years ago. The silence was overwhelming. My footsteps echoed through the empty lobby. It felt strange knowing that this place once held authority, power, and control. Now it was just another forgotten building. I walked down a narrow hallway toward the holding cells. The iron bars were still intact, though rust covered their surfaces. I ran my hand along one of the cold metal doors. Ironically, the place meant to keep people locked in might now be the only thing keeping me protected. There was no electricity, no running water. The roof had visible damage in several places. One corner of the ceiling had collapsed entirely. It was not livable, not yet, but it had something I didn't have before. Walls, security, ownership. I moved into what used to be the chief's office and set my backpack down on the dusty desk. The window was cracked, but the room felt slightly more stable than the rest of the building. I found an old broom in the storage closet and started sweeping broken glass and dirt into piles. Each sweep felt symbolic. I wasn't just cleaning a building. I was rebuilding myself. By evening, exhaustion hit hard. I had eaten almost nothing that day. My body was tired, but my mind refused to slow down. I dragged an old mattress I found in the back storage room into one of the holding cells. The bars might look intimidating to others, but to me they meant safety. I locked the cell door from the inside. For the first time in days, I felt protected. As night fell, darkness filled the station completely. The wind whistled through broken windows, making faint sounds that bounced off the empty walls. Every noise felt amplified in the silence. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about my father's words. "You'll never survive." Maybe he was right. Maybe this building was just a broken dream. But as I listened to the old structure settle into the night, one thought became clear. This abandoned police station wasn't just shelter. It was a chance. And I wasn't leaving. The fourth day inside the abandoned police station was the first day reality truly settled in. The excitement of owning a building for $4 had faded. What remained was the truth. I was alone inside a damaged structure with no electricity, no income, and no backup plan. That morning, sunlight came through the cracked windows, revealing layers of dust floating in the air. The place looked less mysterious in daylight and more broken. I walked through the hallway slowly, examining every weak spot. A section of the roof above the main lobby sagged slightly. Rainwater stains ran down one wall. If another heavy storm hit, parts of the building might not hold. For a moment, fear crept in. What if this building collapsed? What if I had just bought a disaster? I stepped outside to clear my thoughts. Standing in front of the old police station, I noticed something I hadn't before. Despite its damage, the foundation was strong. The brick structure was solid. The frame hadn't shifted. It was neglected, not destroyed. There was a difference. Inside, I decided to claim the building mentally. I chose one room, the former chief's office, and made it my main base. I cleaned it thoroughly, removed broken glass, and pushed heavy furniture against weak window areas to block wind. Each action made the space feel more controlled. Later that afternoon, I found an old file cabinet in the records room that was still intact. Inside were dusty folders and paperwork from years ago. Most of it was outdated reports. But holding those documents made me realize something powerful. This building once had purpose. It once held authority. It once mattered. Now it was forgotten, just like I felt when my father shut the door on me. That connection hit me deeply. Maybe this wasn't just about survival. Maybe this was about restoration. As night approached, the temperature dropped again. I arranged candles I had bought with spare change and placed them carefully around my sleeping area. The shadows danced across the iron bars of the cell. But this time, they didn't scare me. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was adapting. Day 4 didn't bring dramatic events. No storms, no sudden collapses. It brought clarity. This building wasn't my prison. It was my starting point. By the 5th day, reality hit me harder than the cold nights inside the abandoned police station. Owning a building sounded powerful in theory, but ownership didn't magically fix broken ceilings or bring electricity back to life. The place was still damaged, unstable, and far from comfortable. I woke up that morning inside the holding cell I had turned into my sleeping space. The metal bars were cold to the touch, but they gave me a strange sense of security. Outside the cell, the hallway echoed with emptiness. Every small movement I made bounced off the concrete walls. Hunger had become a daily battle. With no money left, I had to think carefully. I collected recyclable materials around nearby streets and sold them for a few dollars. It wasn't much, but it was enough for bread and bottled water. Survival had shifted from dramatic to practical. During the afternoon, I decided to inspect the building more carefully. I climbed onto a desk to examine a cracked section of the ceiling. Pieces of plaster fell lightly to the floor. If I didn't reinforce it soon, it could collapse completely. I found old wooden boards in the evidence storage room and used them to create temporary supports under weak areas. It wasn't professional construction, but it was effort. My hands were covered in dust and small cuts by the end of the day. At some point, while tightening a loose bolt on a broken door, I stopped and laughed quietly to myself. A week ago, I had nowhere to sleep. Now I was repairing my own police station. The irony wasn't lost on me. That evening, I sat in what used to be the reception area, watching the sunset glow faintly through shattered windows. The station no longer felt completely abandoned. It felt claimed. I realized something important then. Survival isn't glamorous. It isn't heroic speeches or dramatic victories. It's small, repetitive actions, sweeping floors, reinforcing beams, finding food, staying calm. The police station wasn't just keeping me alive physically. It was teaching me discipline. Every broken wall reminded me that strength is built slowly. Every crack in the ceiling reminded me that pressure reveals weakness, but it also reveals resilience. That night, lying inside the iron cell, I didn't feel like someone who had been kicked out. I felt like someone who had started over. And this time, I was building something from the ground up. By the 6th day, the police station no longer felt like an abandoned building. It felt like a responsibility. The dust was still there, the cracks were still visible, and the roof still groaned when the wind pushed against it. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thinking ahead. That morning, I walked through the lobby slowly, studying the structure like an owner instead of a victim. I noticed the front signage was still attached, though barely. The faded letters reading East District Police looked almost symbolic. This place once represented authority. Now it represented opportunity. I decided to inspect every room carefully. In the evidence storage room, behind a heavy metal shelf, I found a small locked cabinet that had been overlooked. It took effort to pry it open. Inside were old property maps, archived land surveys, and municipal redevelopment plans that were never completed. My hands froze for a moment. The police station wasn't just an abandoned building. It sat on a large plot of city land, marked years ago for possible expansion. The project had been cancelled, but the documentation proved something important. This land had value. For the first time since being kicked out, I felt more than survival. I felt strategy. I spent hours reading those dusty documents. If the city ever restarted development in this district, this building wouldn't be worthless. It would be central. And I legally owned it. That realization shifted everything. The cracked walls no longer looked like failure. They looked like potential. That evening, instead of just patching holes, I started sketching ideas on the back of old police report sheets. What if this place became something new? A workspace? A training center? A small rental office hub? The building had structure. It just needed vision. When night fell, I didn't lie down feeling defeated. I lay down planning. My father said I would never survive. But survival wasn't my goal anymore. Building something bigger was. By the 7th day, the police station no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied, by effort, by purpose, by me. The building was still damaged, but it was cleaner now. The main lobby floor was swept. The chief's office had been reorganized. I had reinforced 2 weak ceiling sections with extra wooden boards. Small improvements, but visible ones. That morning, I stood outside the building looking at it differently. I wasn't just seeing broken windows anymore. I was imagining repaired glass, fresh paint, lights turned back on, people walking through the entrance again. The idea refused to leave my mind. If this place once served the community, maybe it could again, just in a different way. I walked back inside and began measuring rooms with a piece of string. I found in storage, the holding cells could be converted into secure storage units. The old briefing room could become a shared workspace. The reception desk area could be redesigned into a front office. It sounded crazy, but so did buying a police station for $4. In the afternoon, I visited the public library to use the free internet. I researched redevelopment permits, zoning laws, and city grants. The more I read, the more I realized something important. Abandoned. Properties weren't worthless. They were overlooked, just like people. That evening, I sat at the old chief's desk with a notebook full of ideas. My survival had shifted into strategy. I wasn't just trying to stay alive anymore. I was planning a comeback. When I locked myself inside the iron cell that night, it didn't feel like protection anymore. It felt temporary, because this building wasn't going to stay broken forever, and neither was I. By the 8th day, I had settled into a strange rhythm. The early panic and uncertainty had faded. Instead, every morning began with a simple routine. Sweep, inspect weak spots, fix what I could, think about what I couldn't fix yet. The police station was no longer just a building, it had become a project I couldn't ignore. That day, as sunlight crept through the broken windows, I walked into what used to be the evidence room. Bits of debris and old filing cabinets littered the floor. But among the scattered paper and dust, something caught my eye. A small metal key, rusted but intact. It looked old, unlike the keys that came with the property sale. I picked it up and felt a strange spark of curiosity. I wandered through the station with the key in hand, trying doors and cabinets. Most were locked or stuck. Then, at the far end of the basement, I found a small locked room I had never opened before. Heart racing, I inserted the key. It fit. The door creaked open. Inside was unexpected, a half-empty storage area with old boxes tied neatly, as if someone left in a hurry. There were police uniforms from another era, notebooks with handwritten entries, and a thick folder labeled Confidential. I took the folder and sat in the reception area. The handwriting was faded, but the content was clear. It wasn't police records like arrests and citations. It was documentation about the station's closure, reasons, financial troubles, and notes from council meetings. But buried in those pages was something else, a reference to future redevelopment, plans that the city had shelved. Due to lack of funds, my heart skipped. This wasn't just old paperwork. It was a hidden map of opportunity. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake reading every document, connecting the dots. The plans showed that if developers were willing to invest, the entire neighborhood could be revitalized, starting with this station. The land around the building was prime for renovation and community development. I looked at the cracked walls with a new perspective. This place wasn't a forgotten relic. It was a future waiting to be built. And just like me, it wasn't truly abandoned. It was simply waiting for someone who believed in it. By the end of the 8th day, I didn't just survive. I started dreaming. By the 9th day, I wasn't just living inside the police station. I was studying it like an investment. The confidential redevelopment notes from the basement changed everything. I returned to the library again. This time not as someone looking for shelter ideas, but as someone researching property law, zoning expansion, and city planning history. The East District had once been marked as a commercial growth zone. The only reason it failed was funding. Funding can return. Forgotten land can become valuable overnight. When I looked at the police station again, I stopped seeing broken windows. I saw square footage. I saw structure. I saw central location. The building sat at a corner intersection that connected 3 major roads. It wasn't random. It was strategic. That afternoon, I cleaned the front entrance completely. I removed the hanging broken sign and placed it carefully inside. I wanted the outside to look less abandoned. Small changes, but powerful ones. Then I did something bold. I printed a simple flyer at the library. For future development inquiries, property owner available. I didn't lie. I was the owner. I taped the flyer on the cleaned front door. It felt insane. I had no company, no money, no renovation done. But I had vision. That evening, sitting at the old reception desk, I imagined the building renovated. Open concept workspace, rental offices, maybe even a small training center. The holding cells could become secured storage rooms. The evidence room could turn into archive offices. It wasn't fantasy anymore. It was planning. When night came, I walked through the empty hallway slowly. The echo didn't sound lonely anymore. It sounded like space waiting to be filled. My father said I wouldn't survive. But survival had turned into ownership. Ownership had turned into strategy. And strategy was turning into something bigger than revenge. By the end of day 9, I understood something clearly. I didn't need to prove him wrong anymore. I needed to prove myself capable. And I was just getting started. By the 10th day, everything inside me had changed. The police station no longer felt temporary. It no longer felt like shelter. It felt like the beginning of something real. I stood outside early that morning, staring at the brick walls that once looked broken and hopeless. Now they looked like structure, foundation, possibility. The flyer I taped to the front door the previous day had not gone unnoticed. When I returned from the library in the afternoon, a phone number was written on the bottom corner of the paper with a simple note. Interested? Call. For a moment, I just stared at it. Interested. Someone saw value. I borrowed a phone at the library and made the call. The man on the other end introduced himself as a small local developer. He had passed by the building several times over the years, but assumed it was worthless. When he heard it had a private owner willing to discuss redevelopment, he became curious. We met the next day inside the lobby. He walked through the building slowly, inspecting walls, measuring spaces with his eyes. I watched his expression carefully. He didn't see a ruin. He saw potential. This place, he finally said, is rough, but it's in a prime corner. Prime corner. The words echoed in my head. We talked for hours. I was honest. I had no capital, no renovation funds, no construction experience. But I had ownership. I had the documents. And I had vision. He proposed something unexpected, a partnership. He would handle the investment and construction. I would retain partial ownership of the property. Partial ownership of something valuable. 10 days ago, I had nowhere to sleep. Now I was negotiating business. That night, back inside the holding cell, I didn't feel trapped. I felt elevated. The iron bars around me were no longer protection. They were a reminder of where I started. My father told me I wouldn't survive on my own. He thought survival meant comfort. But survival meant endurance. It meant seeing opportunity where others saw decay. Months later, construction began. The old police sign was removed carefully. The cracked windows were replaced. Walls were reinforced. The holding cells were redesigned into secure office storage spaces. 2 years later, the building reopened, not as a police station, but as a modern business center. And I still kept one iron cell door mounted on the wall inside. Not as decoration, as proof. Because the abandoned police station, that cost me $4, didn't just keep me alive. It gave me ownership. It gave me purpose. And it turned the moment I was thrown out into the moment I rebuilt everything.